On this episode of In the Gun, it's Super Bowl week. Let's talk a little history here of Mountaineers in the big game. All of that and more on this edition of ITG.
Caution, this podcast contains bad jokes, optimism, and a healthy disdain for Pat Narduzzi. Watching it may increase your actual knowledge of actual football.
ITG.
All the pieces are in place for us to have a chance to win it all.
And we're the three best friends that anybody could have.
There's Owen Schmitt in the building.
Like a runaway beer truck down the sidelines.
So where's he in? He in there, Jed Drenning?
I'm not much of an athlete.
The thing that's non-negotiable is playing hard and playing tough.
And Wesley, Valen, Uhler. You are in the gun.
Once you enter this family, there's no getting out.
In the Gun, Super Bowl week here on your new favorite WVU football podcast. I'm Wes Uhler, as always, with the best teammates in the business. It's myself and the signal caller, Jed Drenning, here on this edition of ITG. We may or may not pick up the beer truck. He's hitchhiking out there. We may or may not pick him up along the way here. But as always, you know it takes a village to make this possible. And we got to thank our people real quick. A big thank you to Toothman Ford, JR, everybody there at Team Toothman. We all know cars cost less in Grafton. A big shout out to our buddy Rick Lewis and the good people at Fortis for roof performance and financial certainty. You got to visit fortis.us.com. Our friends of the show, our friends in real life, Johnston Equipment, Tim, Emily, Bryce. Make sure you're checking them out. Route 33 between Weston and Buchanan. And also online anytime, Johnston with a T, JohnstonEQ.com. And of course, to the Book Exchange. Get all your WVU gear and apparel at the Book Exchange. Shop their 2 locations, downtown or on Evansdale. Or, of course, you can always shop online at bookexchange.wv.com. Jed, it is Super Bowl week, and you've got a kind of a funny story to tee us up here before we, talk some memories of Mountaineers in the Super Bowl. But first, a quick little around campus start as we'll do, around campus shout out, pardon me, here to start, as we'll do from time to time this year. How about a big shout out to the WVU women's basketball program, Jed. They are now ranked number 20 in the country. They've won 4 of their last 5 games. They beat number 14 ranked Baylor at home this past weekend, 70-60 in a big one. They are heading on the road to Colorado this week. They snapped Baylor's 8-game win streak in the process. They're half game off the lead in the Big 12, 8-3 in conference. 18-5 overall. Like I said, ranked 20th. Mark Kellogg continues to just do great things with that program, Jed. You lose one of the better players in program history last year to the WNBA, and what do? You just kind of you keep the train humming, you keep the thing rolling, and that's what the women's team has done this year. And then a little bit of a road bump for the men on Saturday as they fell at home to Baylor 63-53, pardon me, but still in a good spot here, 5-4 in the conference, 14-8 overall. Big one on the road Thursday night against Cincinnati on there in Cincy. Tough place to go on the road. Good defensive program there in Cincinnati and what figures to be a lower scoring one. And then you return back home on Super Bowl Sunday to take on the top 15 ranked Texas Tech Red Raiders at 1:00. So things are looking great for the women. I think the men are still a little bit ahead of schedule. You would have loved to have had that one on Saturday, Baylor against Baylor on Saturday, Jed. But I still think the men are a little bit ahead of schedule of where we all thought they were going to be. Both of these programs going to play some important games down the stretch here in February and into March, certainly.
And start with the women. Has there been a point since Mark Kellogg was hired that you couldn't sense where this was going? I really don't think so. I mean, I'm trying to think of a point where you started to wonder, I don't know about this. And there really hasn't been that point. I mean, all arrows have been pointing up. And that's not to say that we didn't have our moments before that, but it's been a very solid hire and heading in a very positive direction for quite some time now. But on the men's front, it just felt like, what was disappointing about that Saturday night, it felt like everything set up in our favor, which it so rarely does. we've been playing relatively well. Baylor had been struggling. You knew there was going to be a good crowd. We had that streak going in the Hope Coliseum. It's just everything seemed to be going our way. But Wes, I'll be honest with you. What I kept thinking about that was we struggled. And in a conference like the Big 12, I think that's the fundamental difference. It's not even so much when you're playing the top teams in the Big 12. There are no empty seats. So even if you encounter a team that's struggling in league play to the extent Baylor was, that team still on a given night can be dangerous enough to beat you. That's the mark of a conference like the Big 12. It's not the top half as much as it sometimes is the bottom half. You better show up and you better show out, and you can't afford not to. And that's what happened to West Virginia, and that lost to Baylor.
Yeah, and Jed, as much as the Coliseum, the trip to West Virginia and Morgantown is tough on a lot of our Big 12 foes, right? It seems like every year we make the joke about how, the Coliseum, death, taxes, and Bill Self and the Kansas Jayhawks losing at the Coliseum, right? Even when it's like a 9-win interim Josh Eilert WVU basketball team, 20-point underdogs, they still find a way to get it done against Kansas. Baylor's kind of been the opposite, man. They've kind of been they've had our number at the Coliseum. I think they've won 4 straight in Morgantown now, I want to say. But yeah, unfortunate. And as you mentioned, they had won 15 or 16 straight at home. We're dating back to last year. We're undefeated there this year. But still, like I said, as disappointing as that loss was on Saturday, when you felt like it was right there for the taking, still, I think a little bit ahead of schedule. And if you can go on the road Thursday night in Cincinnati and get back on track, I think you'll be right there again.
You will. And I mean, you can see where things are going defensively. I mean, there's those flashes, there's those moments. And of course, that's, Coach Hodges' pedigree. But what we've yet been able to overcome are these extensive scoring droughts.
No.
I mean, it's tough. We've won a couple games with crazy scoring droughts somehow, some way. But those are the types of things that when you're playing good basketball teams, or when you're playing even capable basketball teams, I don't want to call Baylor a good basketball team, but they're a capable one. It can sometimes catch up to you. And multiple times it has caught up to West Virginia this year.
Yeah, sure has. I think in that game Saturday, there was like an 11 or 12-minute stretch in the second half where WVU scored 4 points, and that's just
those wins.
Wes, that ain't gonna get it done.
We had a combination. We had like an 11-minute drought and a 6-minute drought. It was a couple weeks ago. I'm trying to remember who it was we beat. We won the game.
Was it K-State?
17
maybe?
Minutes of scoring droughts.
I think it was it K-State, but yeah, you're right. It doesn't happen very often.
Yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. I think it was K-State. Yep.
But still, like I said, I think arrows still pointed up, and you've got some real opportunity here to get that bad taste out of your mouth from Saturday, and a fairly manageable schedule, Jed. You've got 2 ranked games left in Texas Tech and BYU, but they're both at home. You've got a couple tough road trips, certainly, like you always do in the Big 12, but there's a real opportunity for this team to stay above 500 in Big 12 play, which would obviously give you a great chance of having a case in March to make the tournament. And if they were able to do that, I know we've said this before, but if they were able to somehow make the tournament this year after a historic snub last year, after 4 different head coaches in 4 years, that would certainly be a heck of a start to the Ross Hodge era. But here's the hoping. Let's go take care of business in Cincinnati on Thursday.
You look at it like this. We always say in football, you want to be playing meaningful football till late in November. That means you got a shot to go to the conference championship game. Well, it's reaching a point in basketball that you want to be playing well enough that you're in position to get pissed off with what the committee does on Selection Sunday.
That's exactly right.
If you're playing well enough to do that, you're in position to do something.
That's exactly right.
And more often than not, you would hope you would, but let's see where it goes.
Yeah, no doubt. But big shout out to both men's and women's basketball programs. Keep doing your thing, and let's get some W's here in the month of February. Jed, before we go to break and talk some Mountaineer memories in the Super Bowl on the other side, I know you had. It was like a funny prop bet story, I think, that you wanted to share.
Crazy. It was 6 years ago, and what happened was there's a follow John Ewing on X, at John Ewing, and he comes up with some interesting stuff from a prop bet standpoint. Sometimes it's just comical, sometimes for entertainment purposes, of course. But listen to this: 6 years ago, Patrick Mahomes over under for rush yards in Super Bowl 54. Now follow the numbers. The over under was 29 and a half yards. All right.
Okay.
Patrick Mahomes had 44 yards rushing when the game was secured and there were 3 snaps left to
Oh,
take.
no. I
And he
know where
had to
this is
down them.
going. I know where this
So
is
on
going.
first down, he backed up and lost 5 yards. So his 44, remember the over-under is 29 and a half. He had 44. Now he's down to 39. On second down, he backed up and lost 3 yards. His 39's down to 36. The over-under is 29 and a half. That wasn't 44. On third down, he backed up and lost to eat extra time. He
Sure.
backed up and lost 7 yards to take him down to 29 yards. And instead of hitting the over, you hit the under. Imagine if you had significant change on the line for that.
I feel like
one.
I feel like I might remember that now that you mention it, but man, there's a lot of bad beats, but that's the definition of a bad beat right there.
It's a bad beat. Like I remember I was going to ask you if you have anybody in your circle. This isn't necessarily in my circle. I remember up in the valley in Canaan at one of the sports bars. This was back when the Cowboys were playing the Bills. I think it was the first time. It was the blowout game.
Mm-hmm.
They were both ended up blowouts, but this was the blowout from the outset game. The 52-17 game. Well, what I remember about that is you ever see squares pool where you pick different squares on the board
Yep,
and all of them have numbers attached. It's kind of cool the way it works. And every time there's a score change, if you have a number, like you have a number in that case, you have a number for the Bills and a number for the Cowboys. And if the score change lands on your number, like let's say the Cowboys score to go up 14-3, and you have Cowboys 4, Bills 3 as your two numbers, you hit. Every time the score changes, somebody hits. And then there's this massive payout at the end with whoever has the final square for the final score. Well, I think there was, if I remember right, $5 or $6 grand on the line for the final square. And this guy had Dallas 9, Buffalo 7 as his 2 numbers. Now, if you remember, it was 52-17, Dallas 2, Buffalo 7, when Leon Lett scooped that fumble. And he hustled. I don't even want to call it hustling. Don Beebe hustled to chase him down. And it looked very much like Leon Lett was going to waltz into the end zone, kick the PAT, 59-17 final. That dude would have won $5 or $6 grand with the 9-7 squares. Instead, here comes Don Beebe, swats the ball loose. And the next thing you know, the final score, 52-17. It's a 2 for Dallas and a 7. So that somebody was happy, because somebody ended up winning that.
Course,
somebody was very unhappy, fundamentally unhappy. But I think of that. But maybe at the end, just for fun, because we're going to come back from the break and talk about Mountaineer memories in the big game and some of the schools that have had the most players in the game. How many has West Virginia had? And maybe even at the end, we'll make predictions. Why not? I'm going to try and play with the house money here. I predicted 27-20. For the national championship on the show here, and it was 27-21. I was actually rooting for a missed PAT.
There you go.
But really just play with the over-under and then kind of get a vibe for the type of score you go with and just guess. Sometimes you get close, sometimes you don't. But maybe at the end we'll both pick a score.
I like it. I like that. I like that idea a lot. That works for me. I think I've already got one in mind. So if you're playing squares later, pay attention, all right? We'll help you out here on the other side when we return. We'll talk some Mountaineers in the Super Bowl, some memories there, and give, a quick thought or prediction or two about how we think this year's big game is going to play out in San Francisco between the Seahawks and the Patriots. We'll get into all of that and more when we return. You are in the gun.
For nearly 20 years, Fortis has been the nation's leader in providing guaranteed roof performance programs for commercial buildings. Fortis offers roof performance solutions that feature extensive initial and ongoing reconditioning for commercial buildings as an alternative to traditional replacement, with long-term performance guarantees that are backed by global leader Lloyd's of London. Fortis offers a comprehensive range of roof performance management programs that provide financial security, extend the life of our customers' roofs, and make a significant impact on ROI. Fortis is currently improving performance and increasing ROI for customers at more than 4,800 locations, with more than 140 million square feet protected, including many Fortune 500 companies that have turned to Fortis to save money, gain financial certainty, and extend the life of their existing roofs. Fortis has helped customers save more than $520 million in capital roof replacement costs for an average ROI of over 250%. To learn more, visit fortis.us.com. Fortis, roof performance and financial certainty guaranteed.
Nobody supports the blue and gold Mountaineers like Toothman Ford. With over 20 NIL deals and counting, Toothman Ford continues to rally behind our student athletes. And it's time we rally and support the dealer that supports the Mountaineers. Not only does Toothman Ford offer the best prices in the state on pre-owned, their never over MSRP campaign on new Fords guaranteed to save you thousands. Drive with pride all season long, knowing you're supporting the dealer that fuels our Mountaineers. Toothman Ford, where cars cost less, in Grafton and at toothmanford.com.
You're listening to Mountaineer Football Talk.
ITG. When the sun's just rising and the work won't wait, you need the equipment that works just as hard as you do. Johnson Equipment delivers power, performance, and reliability day in, day out. Whether you're plowing fields, hauling loads, or planting the future, our tractors are built to take it and then some. Strong, reliable, ready.
Low-rate financing available on select Coyote models.
Johnson Equipment, farming made easy.
Get all your Mountaineer gear in WVU apparel at the Book Exchange. They're the locally owned and operated retailer with more than 90 years of selling everything you need for game day and everything else you need to show you're the ultimate WVU fan. Shop at their 2 locations at downtown Morgantown or Evansdale on Pattison Drive, or online at bookexchangewv.com.
When shopping online at bookexchangewv.com, be sure to enter code INTHEGUN20 at checkout for an awesome savings of 20%. That's right, 20%.
Back in the gun as we roll along here, and it is time to talk a little Super Bowl, time to talk a little Mountaineers in the big game. Jed, we've had a Super Bowl MVP, WVU alumni in the past. We've had a Super Bowl winning quarterback, and a lot of different memories between and since, and as it relates to Mountaineers in the NFL in the big game here. Speaking of Seattle, right? Bruce Irvin about a decade ago going to back-to-back Super Bowls with the Seahawks, winning one of those. So a lot of different history here. Where you want to start?
Well, I think all things when you're talking Super Bowl and you're talking Mountaineers have to start with Chuck Howley, right? I was too young to necessarily remember watching him in those Cowboy days. Yeah, in a losing effort. So once again, West Virginia, and I think it says so much about the Mountaineer spirit of never giving up. West Virginia holds the distinction of being the only school to produce a Super Bowl MVP on the losing team and an NBA championship MVP on the losing team. So
yes, sir.
That's what the Mountaineers, we don't give up. We don't look at the scoreboard. You talk about not looking at the scoreboard,
Jed,
that's the definition of not
Jed,
looking at it, right?
I don't know if you remember this, but I think I did this on a show like a year or two ago on one of our episodes. There's only, I think it was 9 or 10 universities that have both a Super Bowl MVP and an NBA Finals MVP. Right. There's only like 9 or 10 schools. I know Arizona's one of them. The UCLA I think is one of them. There's a few. But yeah, we are the only school that has the losing Super Bowl MVP and the losing NBA Finals MVP, which is kind of a hilarious. This is what WVU sports do. Even when things go well, they kick us in the gut type underlying message there, which is pretty funny. But yeah, that's a very cool. Unique stat. I wonder if we're the only one that's had a Super Bowl MVP, an NBA Finals MVP, and a Super Bowl winning quarterback as well too. But I digress.
And there was another post earlier this week. It's kind of fun because Super Bowl week, you'll see all these posts. What combination? Okay, here's the only list. The list of schools who are the only schools with an astronaut and a Super Bowl winning quarterback. Things like that. Well, West Virginia's on that list. You have Haas and you have John McBride. So, you could even count Emily Calandrelli at this point, right?
Yes,
so,
you could.
you have a couple, but so it's cool to see these types of things come out. But like I said, you'd be remiss if you didn't start with Chuck Howley.
Just
and then, of course,
real quick, Jed, the Cowboys did go back to the Super Bowl and win it the next year. So Chuck Howley is a Super Bowl champion and a Super Bowl MVP, albeit just from separate games. But he was also a 7-time All-Pro in his NFL career. So pretty good for the Wheeling guy there, I tell you.
These were 2 ugly Super Bowls. Both those Super Bowls were pretty ugly Super Bowls. But the Cowboys and the Colts and the Cowboys and the Dolphins. But I'd say start off here, Wes. I entered this into the group chat this week. There was a a post on X by CFB Tracker at Matchup Tracker, and they pointed out here are the schools with the most all-time Super Bowl players.
Mm-hmm.
Topping the list, not necessarily surprised. You think of the guy that's been to the most Super Bowls, right? That's the school that's been to the most Super Bowl, has the most Super Bowl players, and that's Michigan with 137. Behind Michigan, this reads almost like a list of the blue bloods you would think, with maybe an exception or two, depending on how you look at it. SC number 2, 129, followed by Miami, followed by Penn State, Georgia at number 5. Then here's the first surprise: 116 Super Bowl players produced by UCLA. And UCLA's had their time in history. They've had their time in the sun, but they've always been USC's little brother.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, it's just you've never regarded them as the front runner on the West Coast.
Right.
I mean, the West Coast has been the dominion of the Trojans since the beginning of time.
And you might like think, okay, Troy Aikman, but then there's not. I don't know. You can correct me if I'm wrong. There's not a second like massive name like that that's coming to mind that would carry a bunch of weight.
Yeah, it's, on the basketball front, that's one thing. But look, there's basketball blue bloods are fundamentally different, which is why Duke's not a football blue blood or Kentucky's not a football blue blood. Of course, in basketball, they are. So that's the first interesting one, followed by LSU, Notre Dame, Bama, Oklahoma, and tied with Oklahoma. Here's another one. Depending on when you look at this or how you look at this, Tennessee. I've always viewed Tennessee as kind of fringe blue blood. I mean, I could see. Then you get to Nebraska, who, if you erase the last 25 years, they're the bluest of blue bloods.
They might be, they might be number one on this list.
That blue has been diluted by not just the last quarter century, but this extended losing streak against ranked teams. And then Ohio State, and then Florida. So Florida rounds out that list. What is that? 14 teams that I listed, the top 14 teams. So Florida is at 105 players who have been in a Super Bowl. So that made me wonder, and you see this pop up every so often, how many Mountaineers have been in a Super Bowl? First of all, you want to take a guess? Your call.
You're talking just total ever that have been active on an NFL roster for a Super Bowl.
Yes. Different players, not games, but players.
Yes. Okay. So you said Florida was 105, correct?
Yeah. We're nowhere near the list.
Yeah. Okay. Well, no. My initial guess was going to be 87, but if you tell me we're nowhere near the list, that makes me think it's lower.
Near the list.
47. 47.
By my count, and this is the official tally on the website by Mike Montoro.
Speaking of tally, Daryl Tally.
That's right. Speaking of tally.
Sorry.
So if you want to check, go to WVU Sports, the WVUsports.com, and you can find it there on the official school website. By my count, 23 players have played in 29 games.
Okay.
And we have 13 Super Bowl winners. So in other words, it's not that voluminous. Okay. But I would imagine most schools are kind of in that, area, that same outfield, that same real estate. But first, before we go through who those might be, let's talk about a couple that stand out to us. I might even save Haas for last, but the late Fulton Walker. I mean, one of the cool things is I so desperately, I hated those Redskin teams, those Washington teams of the early 80s. For whatever reason, I just didn't like them. And I desperately wanted the AFC rep, the Dolphins, to win that Super Bowl. That was pre-Marino. It was David Woodley. It was two defensive-oriented teams. And Fulton Walker made a splash play, former Mountaineer Fulton Walker, with a 98-yard kickoff return to give the Dolphins the lead. Of course, it didn't hold. Washington ended up winning 27-17. But that was Super Bowl 17 in 1983. And I thought it was really cool to sit on my couch and listen to them say Fulton Walker with the first kickoff return for a touchdown in Super Bowl history. And I'm thinking, that's a Mountaineer from the Eastern Panhandle, a Martinsburg guy. So that was kind of cool.
I didn't know that. Yeah, that is cool.
Of course, Bruce Irvin, you mentioned as part of the Legion of Boom. Bruce was such an instrumental part for that dominant Seattle defense that really ambushed one of the most dynamic offenses in the history of the NFL. It was following Peyton Manning's first season in Denver. You had that quirky scenario where they played a New York Super Bowl, which that's the first time outside of a dome that they really played in a northern city in a northern climate. And from beginning to end, Seattle just ambushed them. And he was one of the guys pressuring Peyton Manning. They blew him out 43-8. And then, of course, Bruce played also in the Super Bowl where the Seahawks famously blew the lead and lost to the Patriots.
Yep.
And they had an opportunity, I should say, to win at the end. And that's when Malcolm Butler picked off the pass on the goal line. But do you remember what happened at the very end of that game, Wes?
Yeah,
I mean,
Bruce,
the very end.
Bruce got tossed on the very last play, didn't he?
18 seconds to go.
I sure do remember.
What happened was there's a scuffle. Rob Gronkowski, he's pushing, he's swinging. I mean, there's some sort of altercation. Nobody can really get to the bottom of who started or how or why. But Bruce got involved for one reason, and this is in typical Bruce fashion. First of all, Bruce Irvin is anything but a Bush League football player. What he's going to do is stand up when he sees one of his teammates attacked. And he saw Seahawks defensive lineman Mike Bennett get punched. He didn't even necessarily see who did it, but he just reacted. He apologized afterwards. But I believe Bruce became the first player in Super Bowl history to get ejected. And that's so un-Bruce-like, as intense and tenacious as he is.
He was the first to ever get ejected, wasn't he?
There you go.
I forgot all about that.
That's not who Bruce is. It's just as aggressive and intense as he is. He's also level-headed when it comes to that type of stuff, and he typically takes the high road. But that's what happened. There was that scuffle. He said, "I saw somebody swat my teammate at my brother, and I was going to defend him." So, of course, that's fully what you would expect of Bruce Irvin, is to defend a teammate. And that's exactly what he was doing. But so I think about that too. But when you think about the quest or the journey that Jeff Hostetler went on in 1990, it's so funny when I think back to this run that he went on. Of course, he was drafted in 84. Backed up Phil Simms for all those years, and Bill Parcells and the staff recognized his athleticism. He blocked a couple punts for the Giants. I mean, he played different positions for the Giants. I mean, think of that. I remember John Madden talking about a former quarterback. There's a quarterback blocking a punt. I mean, he was an incredible athlete, and the Giants didn't want to waste that. So he spent 5, 6, 7 years in those types of roles, playing very limited snaps. And I remember working out with him when I was at camp, and he would come back for the off season, and everybody would go back from football camp to Towers to eat lunch. And Haas is down there throwing on the turf, and they're like, "Jed, aren't you coming to eat?" I'm like, "Are you kidding me? Haas is here. I'm going to throw with Haas." So I literally stayed there with Haas and threw for an hour. And it was maybe the greatest hour of my life when I was a 15-year-old kid or whatever it was. But
yeah.
So anyway, December 15th of 1990. Here's what's funny about this, Wes. Regular season, the Bills were on the road at the Meadowlands in East Rutherford, New Jersey, against the Giants.
Okay.
I was at this game. I attended the game because a buddy of mine at the time was coaching in Shippensburg, and we decided on Saturday we went to an Eagles-Packers game. It was the game that CBS Sports used for years, where Randall Cunningham leaped over that defender into the end. That was that game. They blew the Packers out. It was a Lindy and Fonte Packers team, really bad Packers team. But that was Saturday. Then on Sunday, we decided, well, hey, we'll scoot on up to the Meadowlands. We'll watch the Bills and the Giants catch another game. So we did that, and Phil Simms ended up getting hurt, and so did Jim Kelly. So it was 17-13, if I remember, at the half, and that's how it ended. But it was two backup quarterbacks, Frank Reich of the Bills and Haas for the Giants in the second half, and they were both very sluggish in offense. And what I remember is the crowd at Giants Stadium just booing the heck out of Haas. Just booing the heck out of him.
No, a New York crowd booing? Yes. I can't imagine that.
Little did we know, Wes, that was the last game they'd lose that year. So Haas now takes the reins. They go on the road and beat the Cardinals. They go on the road and beat the Patriots to round out the regular season. Then in the postseason, they host the Bears and blow them out. Haas plays well in all of these games. Then they go on the road, where they're famously at Candlestick to take on Joe Montana's 49ers, who are trying to go for a three-peat. Giants were big underdogs. Nobody gave them a chance. Haas plays a very efficient brand of football, doesn't turn it over, throws for 176 yards. Next thing you know, Leonard Marshall knocks Joe Montana out of the game. I think it was in the fourth quarter. But I was telling you off the air, one of the reasons that Leonard Marshall had the opportunity to so famously destroy Joe Montana from behind on that vicious hit. Montana escaped the pocket, extended the play by rolling right, and he pulled up. It was almost like he wanted to run, but he was forced to pull up. And when he pulled up, he continued to look downfield. That's what gave Leonard Marshall the opportunity to crush him. I mean, I thought he cut him in half when he hit him. And Steve Young had to finish the game. But one of the reasons Montana couldn't run and had to pull up, former Mountaineer Mike Fox on the Giants defensive line was right in front of him on the perimeter, sealing that off. So Mike Fox was also on that Giants team that Haas played on. So they end up winning that game 15-13 on that last second field goal. And then they go on to play Darryl Talley's Buffalo Bills in Super Bowl 25. And after Whitney Houston serenades us with, I think, the greatest rendition of the national anthem ever sang, they went out and played one heck of a Super Bowl that I still to this day argue, yes, Otis Anderson was a critical part of what the Giants did, but I argue strongly that I think Haas should have been the MVP. Again, that's five starts, 5 wins, no picks in those 5 wins to wrap up the season, West. So he didn't throw a single pick. In the Super Bowl, he threw for 222 yards and a touchdown to Stephen Baker, the touchdown maker. But what an awesome game that was. Darryl Talley, unfortunately for him, he's the Mountaineer who's appeared in the most Super Bowls in 4, and he doesn't have a win, as we know, because they were all at the Bills. But you know what? He played. I went back and looked at like the game they played Dallas and Atlanta, the closer version of the game, which was the second. That was the rematch with the Cowboys. It was close at halftime, like I want to say 13-6, and then Dallas kind of ran away with it in the second half. I believe he led the Bills in tackles with that game. He had 8 tackles in that game. Talley did. So it's not like lack of performance on his part, but those are some of the things that kind of just some of the high points, low points that stand out to me when I look at Mountaineers who, and there's others, of course. We'll go through the list here, but I want your thoughts and your memories on Mountaineers in the big game first.
Yeah, there's 2 that really stand out to me. One that's kind of like local here, and the other that's just more recently. I think anyone who listens to this show regularly or a little bit at all over the years knows this, but for those who don't, and we might have picked up along the way, or maybe you just listen occasionally, I was born and raised in a little town called Mars, north of Pittsburgh. Pittsburgh Steelers fan growing up. Football was very much a Saturday thing for me. Like, our family had WVU season tickets. My grandpa would bring his RV and park right there in the blue lot and all that stuff for years. So football was a Saturday thing for me growing up, but we were Steelers fans. We had our terrible towels and, wore our black and gold on Sundays. And so I was born in 1991. So you could kind of look at the timeline of the first Mountaineers I remember playing for the Steelers were Amos Zaraway and then Mike Logan. And really, 2005 was a big year for young Wesley. I was 14 years old in 2005, and that was the year that the Mountaineers went 12-1 and beat Georgia in the Sugar Bowl and were one of the best teams in the country. That was the year that the Steelers won the Super Bowl for the first time since, the mean Joe Green and Terry Bradshaw and Franco Harris days. Got that one for the thumb, that 5th Super Bowl ring finally there in that famous Jerome Bettis' last game in his hometown of Detroit against the Seattle Seahawks, who are once again back in the Super Bowl. So for me, it was like the first time in my life WVU football was really good. The Steelers had been, they had gone to a Super Bowl and an AFC championship game prior in my lifetime. But 2005 was a big year with how good the Mountaineers and the Steelers are. That was the first. So 2005 was that year that the Steelers won. If you go back a year, Jed, 2004, Amos Zaraway left the Steelers that year. And if I'm remembering correctly, I think he signed with what would have been the Oakland Raiders at the time. Don't quote me on that, but I feel like for some reason I remember famous Amos after his time with the Steelers went to the Raiders. But regardless, Amos's last year in 2000 with the Steelers was in 2003. Okay, so I was pretty sad about that as a young pup. But at the same time, I was like, we still have Mike Logan. We're still good here. Mike Logan in 2004, early in the season, suffers a season-ending ACL injury. So I went from this bright-eyed, bushy-tailed kid who had a Mountaineer on each side of the football for the Steelers that I could watch, to all of a sudden having one who was gone and the other who was done for the year with an ACL. But in 2005, Mike Logan came back. He ended up returning to the Steelers, but that was the year he lost his job to this other safety, Jed. He had long hair, and he's in the Pro Football. Troy Polamalu was his name, if I'm remembering correctly. Yeah, so people might remember that name.
Shampoo commercial guy, yeah.
The shampoo commercial guy, yeah, right, with the crazy hair. But Mike Logan, despite that, was able to recover from his ACL injury, still be a contributor to that secondary in a backup role, and be a real kind of key special teams player for the Steelers. And I just remember still like seeing Mike Logan holding that Super Bowl trophy in Detroit, Super Bowl 40, and that moment of like, the Steelers winning the Super Bowl for the first time in my lifetime, a WVU player playing a role in that. I just remember like how cool that was. You fast forward all these years later, Troy Polamalu goes into the Hall of Fame, 5 or 6 years ago, and one of the first people he thanked in his acceptance speech was Mike Logan, and said he wouldn't have been the player that he was without Mike Logan's leadership. Mike Logan isn't maybe the sexiest WVU alumni name. He's certainly well accomplished and was a great Mountaineer, but he's not a Chuck Halley or a Sam Huff or one of these guys that we talk about all the time. But man, I was a big fan of his, and I've got a little bit of a relationship with him now as he does media stuff here in Pittsburgh, and he's a fantastic dude. So that was the first one for me, Jed. 2005 was a big year. Mountaineers won the Sugar Bowl, Steelers won the Super Bowl, and Mike Logan getting that ring. Which, oh, by the way, too. His mom, I knew there was one more part of this that I was forgetting. His mom, like he told his mom when he was younger that he would play for the Steelers one day because he's a Pittsburgh guy. And so he's able to, after playing, a handful of years to start his career, I think it was with Jacksonville, right, Jed?
That sounds
yes.
right.
I think it was Jacksonville.
Aaron Beasley was at Jacksonville. Was he there with Aaron Beasley?
I'm pretty sure they both were. Yes, I think Beasley was a few years before Mike Logan, but they were both drafted by Jacksonville. That's right. That is how I always remember that. Mike Logan had promised his mom that he was going to play for the Steelers. He ends up signing for the Steelers after his 4 years in Jacksonville. And then his mom got, I believe it was cancer, and she passed away shortly after the Steelers won that Super Bowl. So for Mike Logan to, be able to fulfill his promise to his mom of playing for the Steelers, and then him ultimately winning a Super Bowl I can't remember if it was a few weeks or a few months shortly before his mom passed away. Pretty cool stuff that, again, that was 22 years ago. And I still remember it pretty well.
Wes, and that's a terrific story, great insight. Mike Logan you hear nothing but positive things about Mike Logan.
He's the kindest guy in the world. Real quick, not to interrupt you, sorry, but just while I got all these memories flooding back. Mike Logan, he comes on with us every Steelers training camp. He always comes back to Steelers training camp on the alumni day, and he'll sit down with us and do an interview every year. Jed, every year he says the same thing, something like this. For the last 3 or 4 years, he's said to me, and I promise this is a true story. He's like, Wes, what's up, man? How you doing? And we always start talking about the Mountaineers right away. And every year for the last 3 or 4 years, Mike Logan has put his arm on my back and been like, Jeff Capel, that's the Pitt head basketball coach. Again, I'm sure most of our listeners are aware, but Jeff Capel is the Pitt head basketball coach. Mike Logan, he's done this to me now 3 or 4 times. He's put his arm on my shoulder and said, Wes, Jeff Capel's my neighbor, and he's way too nice to my sons. He gets them courtside tickets for games all the time because nobody wants to go to those Pitt basketball games anyways. He brings them gear and apparel, and he helps them out in the street and the driveway and coaches them up. And he's like, my sons are kind of becoming Pitt basketball fans because of how nice Jeff Capel is, and he's our neighbor who's the basketball coach. He's like, you got to help me with this. We got to get this out of here. We got to get them down to Morgantown. We got to get them, with whoever it was, Bob Huggins, DeVries, Ross Hodge. He gives me this same story every year of Jeff Capel's his neighbor, lives right by them. He's really good to my sons, and he's such a nice guy to them. But now my kids are starting to like Pitt basketball. We can't have this happen. You got to help me talk some sense into them.
Derail that immediately. I agree. You have to completely derail that before it gets. It sounds like
he's a great guy. He's a great guy.
So Wes, here's your trivia before we continue here. Can you tell me Mike Logan is one of two Mountaineers to win a Super Bowl with the Steelers? Do you know the other one?
Ooh. Will Johnson?
Give you a hint. He also played on the back end.
Okay, so it's not Will Johnson because he was a tight end H-back. Also played on the back end.
Played for the Steelers, but didn't win a Super Bowl. That's a good guess.
Well,
by the way, Will Johnson, friend of Toothman Ford, Will Johnson. But...
That's exactly right. Also played on the back end, secondary. I'm trying to think of the.
Spent 1 year at West Virginia as a grad transfer.
Ryan Mundy.
Well played. Yeah.
And then
I take that. He didn't win one. He lost one. I take that back. I said he won one.
Super Bowl 45.
That's when they lost Aaron Rodgers and the Packers. Yeah. Before Aaron Rodgers and Mike McCarthy were in Pittsburgh. They were in Green Bay, if you remember.
Right.
But
and
he
then
lost it. Yeah, I should take that
Jed,
back. He lost
just
it.
my only other shout out of Mountaineer Super Bowl memories that I wanted to give was just remembering in 2023 when the Niners went to the Super Bowl. They ultimately lost in overtime. Great finish to that one between the Chiefs and the Niners. Colton McKivitz. That was the year Colton McKivitz. It was like his third year in the league, I want to say. Locked down that right tackle position for the Niners. Started every single game that year. Regular season, playoffs. Yes. Yes.
Yep.
So that would have been his third or fourth year, but that I think was his first year really. I think he had signed like a 2-year contract extension before that. Started every game that year, playoffs, played really well. That kind of parlayed him into getting the bump the next year, and then the big contract a few years later. But I remember watching that game, and I didn't really care because I'm not like, yay, I love Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, but I don't hate them like everybody else does either. And this was well before even the Taylor Swift angle to all of this came into the equation, right, Jed? I really like Andy Reid. I think Mahomes is incredible. So it wasn't like I didn't really have a horse in the race. I was just watching the game, but I remember the whole time being like, it would be kind of cool if the Niners won because they've got a WVU guy starting on their offensive line. But hey, it all worked out for Colton McKivitz. He signed a $45 million deal a couple years later. I think he's doing all right. And Niners still really good. They're still knocking on that door, so maybe he'll get him one day.
I remember watching the Niners in that first postseason that he played just to watch him. I mean, I was geeking out on O-line play, but and the reason I remember he was drafted in 20 is he famously was a senior. And how ironic is this? On the far and away the worst West Virginia offensive line performance in 2019, including last year, by a wide margin. If you forget how abysmal we were in 2019 with anything we were trying to do, run the football, again, compare it to last year. Last year, we looked like the 85 Sooners compared to that 2019 O-line. And Colton McKivitz was on that line. Now, if you remember, in 2020, Colton was drafted. Here comes Zach Frazier, and that's when the building began.
That's
and
when
we
it
went
started,
from
baby.
that 2019 unit that was in transition to one of the most formidable offensive lines in the Big 12 with Wyatt and with Doug Nestor and on down the line, obviously Zach. But when I think of that, that's one of the things that I think of is when Colton was drafted. I remember watching the Niners just to watch him play, and he was always impressive. But let's blow through the list with some high points here. One more question. This is a tough one. If you're listening, do you know the first Mountaineer to appear in a Super Bowl? I didn't until I looked at the list. I might have seen this before and forgot it. Ken Herrick for the Raiders in 1968. So it would have been against the Packers in one of those early, before pre-merger Super Bowls.
Yeah.
So you have Mike Compton. Here's the list that have played in the Super Bowl. Mike Compton with the Pats, Rasul with the Eagles. Now remember that 2018 Eagles team had 4 Mountaineers.
They sure did.
Mountaineers.
Shelton Gibson, Najee Good.
Keep going.
Rasul Douglas, Najee Good, Shelton Gibson, and oh man, who was the other one? Tell me the position.
He just happened to lead the Big 12 in rushing.
Oh, Wendell Smallwood.
Thank you. Okay. So Walter Easley played for the Niners on the 82 team that beat the 82 Super Bowl to beat the Bengals. Mike Fox, we mentioned. Shelton Gibson, we mentioned. Najee, we mentioned. David Grant played for the Bengals in the late 80s. Haas, we mentioned. Chuck Halley, we mentioned. Bruce, we mentioned. Mike Logan, we mentioned. Alvoid Mays, former corner Alvoid Mays on the national championship team against Notre Dame, played for Washington. He won one. McAfee got to play in a Super Bowl for the Colts.
Of course, kicking off a Super Bowl.
Yeah, of course. Ryan Mundy. We mentioned Jerry Porter, receiver for the Raiders with those dynamic Raider offenses with Rich Gannon. Todd Sauerburn got in the Super Bowl as a punter for the Panthers.
Great call.
Wendell, we mentioned. Quentin Spain for the Bengals.
Oh!
He snuck in there.
Jed, I blocked that one out of my mind because Aaron Donald got the best of Quentin Spain on the final play of that game. I think I blocked that out of my memory. But to be fair to Quentin Spain, he's far from the only person that Aaron Donald ever got the best of.
Yeah, that's a long list.
That's a long list.
Talley. We mentioned Fulton Walker. The only other one that I see that we haven't mentioned is John Thornton.
Oh, yeah, big John Thornton. Let's go.
He was in that Titans Super Bowl against the Rams. The Mike Jones tackle on the 1 yard line to end the game. Yeah, he was in that one. So, that was a fun little reminiscence down memory lane there, Wes. So let's do this. I'm going to jump ahead and we'll wrap things up with this.
Yep.
I want to pick a score. We have no skin in the game, nothing to lose here. So what are you going with in terms of an outcome for this game? Let's look at it like this. Seattle, for those uninitiated, is a 4.5 point favorite. The over-unders floating in the mid-40s, 45.5. Now, for fun, Wes, one of the most popular score being predicted in Vegas.
Tell me.
Seahawks 24, Patriots 17.
Okay.
That's the one with the biggest wagers on it. Other popular scores, Patriots 24, Seahawks 27. I should have read that the other way around. Okay. And then Patriots 27, Seahawks 24, Seahawks 27, Patriots 17, and Seahawks 24, Patriots 20. Those are the most popular score predictions, with 24-17 Seattle coming in at number 1. So what do you got? What are you going to go with?
Jed, let me tell you something here real quick, brother. Normally I laugh, and I host an NFL radio show every day, so I do a lot of NFL conversation every day. I always laugh when people are like, insert NFL team here hasn't played anybody. That was very popular for the Chicago Bears this year. That was very popular for the New England Patriots this year. And I do always kind of scoff at that because it's the NFL. There's only 32 teams. They all have millionaires. They all have Pro Bowlers. They all have, guys that are going to the Hall of Fame or have been all pros or highly paid coaches.
Regional schools on the schedule. That's right.
You do not get Ohio State versus Akron in the NFL. You know what I mean? Like it does not. Even the worst team. I always laugh too when people are like, could Ohio State beat the Browns? No, stop it. It wouldn't even be close. It would be over at the end of the first quarter. Like, stop. It's the National Football.
Chance. I'm kidding. Okay.
Browns wouldn't have a chance, obviously. It'd be over at the end of the first quarter.
Yeah, I'm kidding.
It's the National Football League, man. The difference between the best team and the worst team is not nearly as wide as you think.
Before your time, Wes, they used to play the college all-stars.
Yes, they did.
Against the Super Bowl. They stopped in the mid-70s. You can get on YouTube. The Steelers played in the last game against the college all-stars. And it was
sure did.
Raining sideways, and you couldn't even see it.
Terrible weather, yes.
But go ahead. I didn't want to interrupt, but that was a fascinating time. Yeah.
So normally I think that that's a bunch of hogwash. So now here comes where I do the politician part and do as I say and not as I do. Man, I think the Patriots have had an all-time easy road to get here. And hey, who cares? Every champion in every sport in the history of that sport has needed some luck and some bounces to win a championship. Duh. That's part of the equation. But man, Jed, the Patriots only played 3 playoff teams this entire year, and it was the 10-7 Steelers, the 8-9 Carolina Panthers, and of course the Buffalo Bills in their own division. They had an incredibly easy, if you look at the analytics, if you look at people like Warren Sharp Football that do these things, 31st or 32nd easiest ranked schedule in the NFL by pretty much unanimously everybody who does that. Then they get the Los Angeles Chargers, who are down 3 of their 5 starters on the offensive line and just mangled and can't do anything on offense. Then they get Houston, and CJ Stroud has as many turnovers in that game as he had in the entire regular season. And then they get a Broncos team without Bo Nix. So again, they are in the Super Bowl, and if they win this thing, people aren't going to ask how years from now. They're going to ask how many, and it's going to be a record-setting 7th Lombardi trophy for the New England Patriots. But man, I just feel like the bell is going to toll for New England. I think Seattle and the LA Rams were the 2 best teams in football since about Thanksgiving, maybe sometime between Halloween and Thanksgiving. They ended up playing for the AFC Championship. Seattle's defense is unbelievable. Jackson Smith and Jigba and Kenneth Walker on offense are absolute studs. And man, Sam Darnold has really put a lot of those ghosts of his past to bed. I just think it's Seattle's time. I think they have, like I said, have clearly been the best or one of the 2 clear-cut best teams in the NFL for the last few months. I think it's time for the bell to toll for New England a little bit. I'm sure I'm going to come on here and regret this next week, is somehow the voodoo that always happens for Boston teams happens for the Patriots and they'll capture their 7th Lombardi. But I got Seattle 31-17. I think Seattle wins pretty comfortably.
I like that's well thought out. And let me preface this by saying, when it comes to the NFL, I'm a Steeler fan as well. So I don't want the Patriots to get that 7th. I don't want them to hoist that 7th Lombardi.
This edition of the Patriots is not nearly as hateable as their previous edition, but still.
That's true. But this is a matchup. The Bo Nix injury with Denver was unfortunate. You can make an argument that Matt Stafford outplayed Sam Darnold. I mean, I think it's the 3rd game in a row that Matt Stafford was the best quarterback on the field in the playoffs and lost.
He's unbelievable.
So the Rams defense just has let him down 3 straight playoff losses, but that's a different story. But this is a matchup. It's not to say that these guys don't deserve to be there, neither team, because they're both top 10 offenses. They're both top 10 defenses. They're very well-rounded. So if you want to parse differences, you're really splitting hairs. So this is what I look at. For all the things that Seattle has done well, and the resurrection story of Sam Darnold, how Minnesota let him go, I have no idea. They hedged their bets with J.J. McCarthy. I think they're regretting that. But Sam Darnold has been the story in the NFC West this year. And the way he's come on and just continued to improve late in his career the way that he has. But the one thing about this Seattle team, they're -3 in turnover margin.
They are.
That's interesting to me. And in large measure, Wes, that's because they've committed the 2nd most turnovers in the entire NFL. 28 turnovers. Part of that has been off the hand of Sam Darnold with the 14 picks, but they're also a fumble-happy football team. Sam Darnold, he didn't lose all of them, but he fumbled 11 times in the regular season. Now, he's righted the ship in the offseason. He hasn't fumbled. He hasn't thrown a pick. He's played clean as a whistle for 2 straight games. And when you look on the other side, Drake May, meanwhile, in 3 playoff games, has fumbled 6 times. Yep. And Wes, the strange thing is, none of those 6 have been in the blizzard in Denver.
Yeah,
0 fumbles in that game. So the 6 fumbles came in the 2 other games. So it's just strange how all this plays out. And when you look at it, it's almost like, okay, you get the sense that one of these trends is going to break and revert to form. I think the trend that might break and revert to form is the Seahawks offense turning the football over.
Ooh.
They haven't had the issue with it in the postseason that they had in the regular season. So they're playing the cleanest they played all year, as they should in the postseason. But when you look at it, Wes, we have had, and we mentioned that the Patriots are a 4.5-point dog, and none of these games necessarily relate to the other. But do you know how many underdogs have won the Super Bowl since 2010?
I feel like it's been a pretty sizable number, yeah.
Including 3 in a row. I'm going for that trend to continue. I'm looking for the Patriots to shock the world. Yeah, they caught every break imaginable, and they do what good teams do when they catch breaks, is they seize on them and they capitalize on them. Uh, Even the Bo Nix loss at Denver, I think that was the biggest break they caught.
Sure.
Jarrett Stidham, it's not that he didn't play well. It's just what those conditions that they were asking him to play well in, that was just too tall an order. I'm going 24-23 Patriots. That's what I'm going with. Great game, but you're probably the one that will be smiling like the butcher's dog and not me when we regroup next week and talk about this. Like I said, I got lucky with the national championship and daggone almost nailed the score. I'm not so sure that's going to happen with this one, but I don't know. I'm just going with the vibe that I don't like the fact the Seahawks are a turnover happy football team. I'm not convinced all of that is out of their system, and I think enough of it might haunt them. We'll see. I'm going to say Patriots in a close one, 24-23.
I like it. I think the real X factor is that those turnovers, like you were talking about. I mean, obviously that's the case in every football game, but I think especially with both of these quarterbacks for this one. And Jed, both of these teams have monster defensive lines, and they've had offensive lines that have played better, but still have some issues. Which defensive line can feast a little bit more on the offensive line and create some TFLs, create some sacks, maybe a strip sack or something like that to force a turnover in a big spot. I think whichever offensive line can hold their own better in this one is going to have a real chance to win it.
I agree, and I'll add, and this factored into my decision too, neither defense is crazy opportunistic. Seattle's more opportunistic when it comes to takeaways, but it's like neither of these defenses pushing 30 takeaways on the season. That's not the case. So I was like, all right, maybe toss the ball security issues of the offenses out. And I think the Seahawks, I don't remember what the numbers are, but the Seahawks might have close to twice as many as the Patriots. But those fumble issues have been team wide, and I don't understand it. Of course, a lot of it's the culprit's usually your quarterback, and that's been. But I go back to it again. Drake May has fumbled 6 times in the playoffs. I think he's going to buck that trend. And Sam Darnold, again, I love Sam Darnold's story.
Pumpkin.
Love it.
He's going to turn into a pumpkin, Jed.
He's due for a turnover or two that might cost them. We'll see. Or maybe he just keeps cruising like he has been.
Last side plot for you, and I know you'll appreciate this. I talked with you about this last summer, how I had found this research that after turnover margin, the next key indicator for who wins a football game is explosive play differential. Do you remember this conversation we had back in July or August?
Yeah.
17 regular season games in the NFL. Reminder, explosive play, that's 10 or more yards on a run, 20 or more yards on a pass. That's what's classified as an explosive play. You want to take a gander, Jed, and 17 games in the regular season of the NFL, which 2 teams in the NFL had the best explosive play differential? The Seattle Seahawks won at plus 40, and the New England Patriots at 2 at plus 39. So they had 40 and 39 more explosive plays than they surrendered, and they're both in the Super Bowl. The final 4 teams, the Rams and the Broncos included, were all in the top 5 of explosive play differential in the NFL this season.
Oh, that's impressive. That's really impressive. I mean, you would expect it out of the Rams. I might be most surprised. It tells me that the Patriots haven't allowed a lot of them.
Yes.
Because offensively, they're not as dynamic as Seattle.
Correct.
But you know, that Kenneth Walker in that run game of Seattle, that's, to me, that might be the X factor. I don't know. But it should be a great matchup. It should be a good game. That's what I'm hoping for with no dog in the hunt here.
Certainly not a lack of storylines, and that is like you're saying, when you don't have a dog in the hunt, a dog in the race, a dog in the fight, whatever cliche you want to use there. I think we're all just looking for storylines, and this game certainly has a ton, from the coaches, from the quarterbacks, from the 10 years ago these teams meeting in a Super Bowl and that dramatic finish. So it'll certainly be a lot of fun on Sunday, and we'll be back to discuss it and see who's got the egg on their face, Jed or I, next week, and see how this one plays out. But that'll do it for us for this week. So for the producer, co-host, Mr. Do-It-All, Schuyler Callihan, for the runaway, barbecuing, sharp-dressed beer truck, Big O, he's the signal caller, Jed Drenning. I'm Wes Uhler. The one thing we ask of you is to be an ear and tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast. Take care, everybody, Enjoy the Super Bowl, and we'll talk to you soon. You've been In the Gun.
ITG.
The fun doesn't have to stop here.
Be sure to hit subscribe and never miss an episode.
If you have any questions, suggestions, or feedback,
be sure to follow us on X at In the Gun Podcast.
Join us again next time.
Until then,
tell an ear to tell an ear about your new favorite WVU football podcast.
This mission is over. It's over.